An important movement is heading your way, and its journey began far longer ago than you recognize. Before you continue absorbing this, pause for a brief second and become entirely grounded in this moment. What is about to be shared with you is no accident. It is not some random twist of fate. It is not a fabrication of your mind. For a significant period you have been detecting a subtle shift beneath the surface of things. You might have doubted it. You might have attempted to rationalize it away. You might have told yourself that you were assigning too much weight to trivial occurrences. But deep down a part of your being never ceased observing. A part of you never stopped sensing that something was present. Your inner voice has been conversing softly for a very long time. Not through overwhelming indicators or spectacular occurrences, but through tiny impressions, quiet instances, and gentle inner nudges that lingered with you even when everything else dissolved. Even when you attempted to disregard those impressions, they remained. Even when you directed your attention elsewhere, they returned. Even when cold logic insisted you should move forward, something within your spirit persisted in paying attention. Very shortly, an individual might utter phrases that validate exactly what you have already detected for a long time. And when that second arrives, you might not experience shock. You might not experience astonishment. Instead, you may encounter something much more tranquil. You may experience a sense of relief. You may experience a sense of recognition. You may experience a serene comprehension, as if a truth you already possessed has finally stepped into the light. Because the reality is, you perceived it before any evidence appeared. You perceived it before any rationalizations were offered. You perceived it before a single discussion took place. You perceived it before there was a solitary physical item to point toward. There was merely an internal knowing within you, a silent consciousness that remained constant. Occasionally it manifested as an attraction toward a particular individual. Occasionally it emerged as an abrupt thought that arrived without any apparent trigger. Occasionally it felt like a soft weight or a warmth in your chest that defied easy description. You may have observed instances when a specific name crossed your mind out of nowhere. You may have found yourself pondering someone at the most unusual hours. You may have recognized that particular memories endured far longer than logic dictated they should, and regardless of how forcefully you attempt to dismiss those occurrences, they returned. This takes place because intuition functions quite differently than logic. Logic demands physical verification. Logic requires absolute certainty before it extends belief. Logic searches for explicit answers. Intuition operates on another level. It recognizes subtle designs before the analytical mind can process them. It detects shifts before any action becomes visible. It collects quiet data from minute elements that are easily overlooked. By virtue of this, intuition frequently grasps realities long before the intellect can articulate them. For a season, you may have experienced self-doubt. You may have whispered to yourself that you were merely imagining scenarios. You may have persuaded yourself that you were manufacturing significance where none existed. You may have hunted for justifications to disregard your internal feelings. You may have wondered if you were overanalyzing commonplace interactions. You may have interrogated your own perspective on numerous occasions, but even in the face of all that skepticism, the feeling never entirely vanished. It lingered somewhere just beneath the surface, silent, constant, accommodating, not pushing its way to the front, not demanding your focus, simply awaiting the precise second to make itself known. And that period of waiting has endured much longer than you recognize, because the thing that is drawing near did not originate just the other day. It did not originate a week ago. It did not originate out of thin air. This has been developing gradually over a long span of time. While your focus was directed toward the demands of daily life, an entirely different narrative was developing in the background, softly, progressively, nearly invisibly. An individual has been harboring reflections they never completely communicated. Someone has been guarding words they desired to utter, but could not summon the resolve to speak aloud. Someone has been navigating internal sentiments they did not fully comprehend, and this journey has not been simple for them. A great many people assume that quietness implies nothing is occurring, but frequently the exact inverse is reality. Quietness can indicate that something is far too significant to be uttered casually. On occasion, individuals remain quiet because they dread altering a relationship they hold dear. On occasion, they stay quiet because the prospect of rejection terrifies them. On occasion, they keep silent because they are terrified of being misconstrued. So rather than speaking up, they wait. They pause. They ponder. They watch. And while they remain frozen in hesitation, hours and days continue marching forward. This individual may have held you in their thoughts far more frequently than you suspect. They may have observed nuances that others completely overlooked. They may have retained minor exchanges that you dismissed as trivial. They may have anchored their attention to your dispositions, your energy, your very presence. Occurrence that appeared minor to you may have carried profound meaning for them. Instance you long forgot may have remained perfectly preserved in their memory. Expressions you scarcely recollect uttering may have lived within them for an extended duration. On more than one occasion they may have arrived on the absolute precipice of speaking up. On more than one occasion they may have felt fully prepared. On more than one occasion the words may have nearly escaped their lips. But during every single instance apprehension stepped in to block them. Apprehension possesses immense power. It persuades individuals to hit pause. It convinces people that a more ideal moment will manifest later. It convinces people that keeping quiet is the more secure path. It convinces people that the following day will present an easier path. But that following day frequently transforms into yet another following day, and then another, until the weight of the quietness grows heavier than the reality it conceals. Your intuition may have already picked up on this internal battle. Even in the absence of explicit communication, even without straightforward words, a certain element may have felt unresolved between the two of you. There may have been instances when the underlying bond felt vastly more potent than the literal exchange of words. Instances when the quiet itself felt heavy with meaning. Instances when a basic crossing of paths lingered in your thoughts much longer than common sense dictated. You might not have completely grasped the reason why, but a portion of your being took note. A portion of you identified that a certain reality remained unspoken, and an unspoken reality never truly evaporates. It persists in moving softly beneath the surface of things. It continues seeking an outlet for expression. It continues awaiting the correct second to step forward into the light. That is precisely why specific bonds are incredibly difficult to erase from memory. That is why particular individuals linger in your reflections even when they are no longer physically around. That is why specific encounters never completely dissolve. There is frequently an unresolved element that persists in the backdrop of your consciousness, and perhaps that is exactly what you have been picking up on this entire time. Not an illusion, not fantasy, not mere wishful thinking, but a quiet perception of a reality that has not yet been fully unveiled. Right now, a shift is beginning to take place. The underlying energy enveloping this scenario is shifting. What once appeared completely frozen is beginning to loosen up. What once appeared obstructed is starting to find momentum. The hesitation that once appeared completely permanent is beginning to lose its grip, and the explanation behind this is basic. Human beings can only bear the weight of unspoken reality for a limited duration. Eventually, stepping into honesty becomes less taxing than maintaining the quiet. Eventually, giving voice to a feeling becomes lighter than keeping it buried. Eventually, speaking up manifests as a much more potent choice than withholding. And when that specific second arrives, an entire reality can shift in a remarkably brief window, sometimes through nothing more than a handful of phrases. If this message is already awakening a response deep within your spirit, take a second to acknowledge that sensation. Sometimes a message resonates powerfully, not because it introduces completely novel data, but because it shines a light on a reality you already recognize in the depths of your being. What you are beginning to grasp extends far beyond a solitary admission. It does not merely pertain to another human being. It also pertains directly to you. It points to your level of awareness. It points to how frequently you have perceived occurrences before they ever manifested physically. It points to how your internal radar has been operating seamlessly, even when your analytical mind was filled with hesitation. Life is not plotting to startle you with an experience that is completely foreign. Instead, it is progressing toward validating an internal truth you have already been sensing for a very long time. And that distinction carries immense weight, because what this individual is coming to realize is far more profound than superficial sentiment. They are realizing that the feelings they harbored never truly vanished. They are realizing that physical distance failed to wipe out the bond. They are realizing that the quiet failed to extinguish what was still very much alive within their spirit. They might have attempted to forge ahead. They might have tried to persuade themselves that the chapter had closed. They might have poured their focus into alternative dimensions of existence, separate obligations, or different diversions. But the underlying sentiments remained, the reflections remained, the unresolved inquiries remained, and carrying the weight of all that internal noise ultimately grew more exhausting than simply revealing the truth. That is precisely why this specific juncture carries so much weight, not merely for their journey, but equally for yours, because unresolved dynamics influence both individuals involved. Even when absolute silence is maintained, a portion of your focus can stay anchored to an issue that has not reached a resolution. A portion of your consciousness can stay bound to an issue that has not been fully processed. And currently, an element within that specific bond is transitioning toward absolute clarity. When honesty finally makes its entrance, an internal clearing begins to take place within you. The entire atmosphere enveloping the scenario begins to transform in a highly perceptible manner. What previously felt burdensome and perplexing gradually starts to shift. The ambiguity that previously occupied such a massive territory in your thoughts begins to fade away, and in its vacancy, an attribute of immense worth starts returning to your possession. Your internal clarity returns, your personal assurance returns, your foundational trust in yourself begins to climb once more. It might manifest quietly at the beginning, almost imperceptibly, but it carries profound significance because occasionally the most transformative shifts are not loud or spectacular. They are steady, deep, and enduring. This specific juncture can feel like a profound emotional release, as though a mechanism inside your spirit that was frozen has finally been set back into motion. And within that newfound movement, you may begin to grasp an incredibly vital lesson. Your intuition was never steering you down a false path. Your emotional perceptiveness was never a vulnerability. Your deep sensitivity was never a defect that required a remedy. Instead, it functioned as a sophisticated form of perception. You were picking up on a genuine reality even during the moments when you could not completely rationalize it. You were identifying structures before they became obvious. You were feeling subtle shifts before they were ever assigned vocabulary. You may look backward now and recognize that you were sensing dynamics long before they assumed a definite structure. You were identifying a reality before it ever possessed a language. And a vast number of individuals journey through existence completely disregarding this internal compass. They doubt their own insights. They discard their gut instincts. They operate under the assumption that only visible proof is worthy of confidence. Only what can be calculated or displayed counts as real. But existence frequently teaches a completely separate lesson as time marches on. On many occasions, awareness crosses the finish line first, and intellectual comprehension follows later. On many occasions, the heart identifies a reality long before the intellect can construct an explanation for it. And on many occasions, you simply register that an element is out of alignment, or that a transition is occurring even before you can logically articulate the underlying reason. That is precisely why this category of moment holds such profound importance. It does not merely validate what another individual experiences or articulates. It simultaneously validates a core component within your own being. It confirms that your capacity to perceive and interpret was fully operational the entire time. If you reflect deeply upon the entirety of what you have navigated through lately, you may begin to identify a distinct pattern. The internal maturity you have achieved, the exercises in endurance you have endured, the instances of ambiguity you were forced to inhabit, the seasons when you craved definitions but were denied them, and the stretches of time where you had to surrender your grip on control even when it induced deep discomfort. Not a single one of those encounters was squandered. Even if they felt incredibly challenging while you were in the thick of them, they were actively molding a structure inside your spirit. Every solitary encounter was preparing you. Every solitary instant was aiding you in constructing greater fortitude within your being. Every separate trial was instructing you on how to remain completely anchored even when the horizon was entirely obscured. Gradually you were mastering the art of standing firmly upon your own foundation without requiring continuous outside validation. You were discovering how to access tranquility even in the absence of immediate answers. You were discovering how to place faith in yourself once more, step by individual step, even when surrounding elements felt completely unpredictable. By virtue of that personal maturity, you are currently equipped to accept the truth from an entirely upgraded position within your spirit. Not out of a sense of desperation, not out of apprehension, not out of emotional reliance, but from a posture of absolute stability. And that specific transformation alters everything regarding how you digest clarity when it finally steps forward. When transparency finally manifests, it is vital to grasp and concept with absolute precision. Transparency does not automatically manufacture a flawless path forward. Truth carries no absolute guarantee of a perfect initiation or a perfect conclusion. What honesty does deliver, without fail, is absolute clarity. It swaps out confusion for genuine comprehension. It swaps out assumptions for verifiable realities. It swaps out guesswork for conscious awareness. And the moment you occupy a space of awareness, an incredibly vital asset becomes accessible to you: choice. You gain the absolute freedom to determine the path that follows. You are no longer merely reacting to hypotheses or mental scenarios. You are no longer piecing together absent fragments inside your mind. You are no longer hunting exhaustively for obscured indicators or hidden motivations. Instead, you are directly responding to what is tangible and what stands directly before your eyes. And this is precisely the location where a more profound dimension of strength begins to unveil itself. Genuine fortitude is never about dominating other individuals or forcing specific conclusions to occur through sheer willpower. It is never about attempting to compel existence to adhere to a flawless agenda. Genuine fortitude is an attribute that is far quieter and significantly more grounded. It originates from looking at a situation with absolute accuracy and subsequently proceeding with unyielding self-respect. It originates from remaining completely anchored regardless of the narrative that unfolds next. It originates from trusting your inherent value even when circumstances are entirely unpredictable. If you are absorbing these phrases and detecting a surge of feeling rising within your chest, it is highly rewarding to pay close attention to that internal shift. Not because it is acting as a fortune teller for your future, but because it is unveiling a truth regarding your internal landscape. Feeling frequently points directly toward the elements that hold the highest priority for us. It highlights what genuinely commands our focus. It displays exactly where our heart has placed its chips, even during the periods when we are not consciously aware of the investment. If, conversely, you experience an overarching calm while absorbing this message, that serenity also possesses profound meaning. Authentic truth frequently generates a sense of peace rather than a state of panic. When a concept aligns seamlessly with what you already grasp deep within your core, it can feel strangely familiar. Not theatrical, not overwhelming, merely quietly familiar, akin to a missing piece clicking perfectly into its slot after being misplaced for a long duration. And if this message strikes a chord of familiarity within you, it may very well be because your intuition identifies a reality within it. It may be because it gives voice to a dynamic you have already been picking up on for quite some time. It may jog your memory regarding reflections or sensations you could not completely articulate previously, but that were permanently present in the background of your awareness. As this specific moment draws nearer to your reality, there is a vital principle to anchor yourself to. There is absolutely no requirement to force any dynamic. There is absolutely no requirement to accelerate answers out of a place of apprehension. There is absolutely no requirement to generate pressure in areas where patience is still actively required. Existence frequently unveils its chapters at its own unique speed, and true comprehension makes its entrance when the sequence is ideal, never when it is artificially compelled. Permit circumstances to unfold completely naturally. Permit individuals to arrive at their own distinct realizations in their own time. Permit honesty to make its entrance when it is fully prepared to step forward, because a truth that emerges organically possesses an entirely separate caliber of fortitude. It feels authentic. It feels grounded. It feels enduring, never fleeting or manufactured. When it finally makes its appearance, you may realize an essential truth. Your intuition was not merely picking up on a bond or an underlying feeling. It was simultaneously picking up on timing. It was sensing that particular realities could only step into the light when the ideal environment was fully established, when both individuals had reached the necessary stage of readiness to look them in the face. And readiness alters absolutely everything about how truth is integrated and digested. As you persist in journeying forward, another dimension of this experience begins to surface. The most significant transformation may not actually take place within the external scenario itself. The most significant transformation may take place directly within you. After honesty is spoken aloud, you may detect a silent sense of tranquility diffusing through your daily life. Reflections that used to feel incredibly loud may begin to soften their volume. Inquiries that used to repeat on an endless loop in your mind may start to drop their intensity. The compulsion to relentlessly cross-examine every single detail begins to slowly dissolve. This takes place because clarity exerts a powerful settling influence over the human psyche. Ambiguity breeds internal friction. Unresolved questions manufacture psychological pressure. The vast unknown extracts a heavy toll on our emotional reserves. But the moment comprehension finally arrives, that accumulated pressure starts to drain away. You may feel noticeably lighter. You may feel far more grounded in the present. You may feel deeply reconnected to your own essence once more. You might even observe that historic memories begin to take on an entirely different color. Scenarios that once appeared completely baffling may suddenly snap into sharp focus. Discussions that once appeared fragmented may unveil a far deeper purpose. Even spans of silence that once induced pain may begin to feel entirely understandable through a fresh lens. This shift does not yank you backward into the past. It assists in liberating you from dragging around emotional baggage that no longer serves any purpose in your life. From that precise intersection forward, an entirely fresh volume initiates in your life story, a volume constructed upon conscious awareness rather than thick confusion, a volume constructed upon absolute honesty rather than ongoing guesswork, a volume constructed upon conscious choice rather than emotional yearning or constant unpredictability. That specific variety of foundation alters the manner in which you experience every single facet of life. When you are planted firmly in a territory of clarity, you no longer harbor the same craving for constant outside validation. You no longer feel compelled to overanalyze every single text message or minor crossing of paths. You no longer hunt for camouflaged significance in every single pause or extended quiet. Your nervous system begins to find its equilibrium. Your mind adopts a much quieter posture. Your heart becomes infinitely more steady. Even if outstanding inquiries still linger, they no longer present a threat to your peace. They no longer dictate your emotional states or derail your core stability, because currently you are standing upon something far more resilient. You are standing in truth, and truth establishes a variety of stability that ambiguity is completely powerless to duplicate. You begin to grasp an incredibly profound reality. You possess the capacity to navigate through thick uncertainty without completely losing your identity in the process. You no longer carry the urge to dictate every single final outcome. You no longer feel it is your personal obligation to force clarity into physical existence through sheer effort.